Hi guys, it's Danica Christin, and in today's video I want to talk about the differences between the Everest Base Camp track and the Annapurna Circuit. When I researched those two tracks last year, I couldn't really find any comparison on YouTube, and so I thought it'd be quite interesting to make this video and maybe help some people out who are making a decision which track they should do. I did both tracks in 2016. I really enjoyed both of them, but they're quite different, so I just want to go over the differences in this video. Now let's first talk about some basic stats. So the Everest Base Camp track will last around 12 to 14 days return, and that includes additional days for acclimatization, which I really recommend. Whereas the Annapurna Circuit is about 12 days, so it's slightly shorter. In terms of the best season, the Everest Base Camp track is best done between October and December, whereas the season for the Annapurna Circuit is slightly shorter. I wouldn't do it past November just because there might be snow on the Torringlark Pass, and you don't want to go through that pass when it's covered in snow. There's a second season where you could also go, which is kind of between March and May. That's the same for both tracks. But what I'd keep in mind is that although it's slightly warmer during that time, the air is not as clear and the views won't be as good. In terms of altitude, the Mount Everest Base Camp track goes up to 5,300, and there's a smaller mountain you can climb on the way up near Dingboche, and that is 5,600. So that's a mountain you can do on the way up, and it helps you acclimatize as well. The Annapurna Circuit goes up to 5,400. So they're quite similar in terms of altitude. Now, in terms of how you get to the tracks, for the Everest Base Camp track, it's best to fly from Kathmandu to Lukla. The flight is quite expensive. It's about $300 US, and it's also one of the most dangerous flights on the planet because the runway in Lukla is very short. It's only about 100 meters, and flying in and out of there is actually quite scary. There's also another way you can get to Everest Base Camp. You can start the track 1 week earlier and do an extra week of walking, and that will save you the cost of the flight. But keep in mind, you'll have to spend a lot of money on food, accommodation, maybe a porter guide just to get there. So it might not be worth doing it. When you do the Annapurna Circuit, you can just take the bus from Pokhara or from Kathmandu. You can also fly from Kathmandu to Pokhara to save you some hours on the bus. Now, in terms of cost, for both tracks, I hired a porter guide, and he cost me $18 a day. If it's just one person, don't be talked into hiring a guide and a porter. All you need is a porter guide, which is a guy who will carry your backpack, and he'll also be able to speak a little bit of English, and that will be plenty for you. If it's 2 people, it's probably better to hire a porter and a guide. I also rented a sleeping bag and a down jacket for the tracks. They cost $1 per day each. The Everest Base Camp track cost me around $25 a day for food and accommodation, whereas the Annapurna was only about $20 a day. And I could really feel that difference because I felt like on the Annapurna Circuit I was just splurging a lot more, whereas like on Everest I was just really watching the money, so that track is quite a bit more expensive to do. In terms of temperature, both tracks get really cold at high altitude, but the Everest Base Camp track gets a lot colder and you spend a lot more time at high altitude. I spent 6 nights above 4,000 meters on the Everest Base Camp track, and that gets really, really cold. I was absolutely freezing, whereas on the Annapurna Circuit, you start at a much lower altitude. You have many more nights at a warmer temperature, and then I only spend 1 or 2 nights above 4,000 meters, so that's a lot more bearable. Some of the greatest highlights of the Everest Base Camp trek are, of course, seeing Everest and the beautiful mountain scenery in the area along the track, and also Tengboche Monastery, which is a Buddhist monastery along the track, and that's absolutely fantastic. The highlights of the Annapurna Circuit are the beautiful mountain scenery, of course, as well, the desert scenery, the cultural differences you explore along the track, and also seeing the Hindu pilgrimage site in Muktinath. These are all really amazing things you get to see along the Annapurna Circuit. And another plus of this track is that the huts are much nicer actually. There's a bit more comfort than on the Everest Base Camp track. Unfortunately, both tracks also have their downsides. So as I already mentioned, on the Everest Base Camp track, there is a lot more, the weather is a lot colder, and also along the track there's a lot of donkeys and yaks, and sometimes they actually cause traffic jams, so to speak, and that can be quite annoying if you just need to let 30 yaks, pass you, and it can be quite dangerous, and you need to make sure you're standing on the side where the hill is, not where you go down the mountain, because it has happened that yaks have pushed people down the mountain, so you've got to be really careful there. In terms of the downsides of the Annapurna Circuit, they are building a road along the track. It's not a problem actually in the area that's leading up to the pass, like there it's okay, but after the Torunglak Pass, the road can get quite annoying once you've reached Muktinath. It gets really dusty, and that part was not enjoyable anymore, I've got to be honest. My overall verdict is that both tracks are really amazing. I love both of them, and honestly, if you can do both, I really would. And for the Annapurna Circuit, I can actually honestly recommend extending it and doing Poon Hill and Annapurna Base Camp as well. That's what I did, and I actually loved that extension even more than the Annapurna Circuit itself. But I have to say, if you can only do one trek, then hands down it is Everest Base Camp, because the scenery is just out of this world. It's so beautiful, it's so stunning. So if you have to make a choice, if you can do only one or the other, then I would do Everest Base Camp. Otherwise, if you think you'll come back to Nepal, do one now, do the other later. But honestly, if you can only do one, it is Everest Base Camp. Please let me know in the comments if you have any further questions about either of these tracks. I've done them both, so I'm more than happy to answer all your questions, so just ask away. And yeah, please subscribe to my channel for more videos. Bye!